what's that other 60% cushion? Now, it could come back, and Mike and his team could come back and say, Joe, you know what matters? It matters $3.42 annually. I'll be like, wow, okay, thank you. I guess I was wrong. And that wouldn't be the first time. But the logic to me dictates that if you build a church for 10 and 4 show up, you've got 6 empty pews, 6 empty chairs, you've got unused capacity there.
And do we know what these students are doing? Are they part of a carpool, someone driving, are their parents dropping them off? Like, are they seasonal? Like, are they fall athletes that are then riding it in the spring? Like, do we know
Yes, all
any
of
of
the
these
above.
logistics?
All of the above. In fact, we
Okay.
have more ridership in the morning than we do after school.
Okay.
Because the
Because
number
of
of
activity
students,
and-
will ride to school, and then they have practice or games after school.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's all of the above. We have seasonal, we have a number of seasonal riders because of sports as well.
Okay.
Do we have any legal requirements though to provide?
We can charge.
trucks?
We can charge.
There's nothing legal there, okay.
And the other thing, let's just get it out there, is that when you look at the survey, you look at that part of the survey over 1.5 miles, it's all zeros.
Great.
So nobody's charging for it. So we'd be stepping out on
Third row.
onto the third rail.
Yeah.
It's not something we have to do tonight. I know that I've been chirping about this for a little bit of time, but I would like to advocate, and again, I'm just one. I may be overly advocating here, but that if the board would like to look at that opportunity, rather than have them waste their time, because I would like them to look at the opportunity, then I think we'd move in that direction. Because I'd hate to have them go through all that and come back and everybody say, you know what, never mind, we're not even going to consider that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the evaluation though has to be, first we have to get a sense if we were able to eliminate 20%, saying absolutely no way we're going to ride it, and you got it down to, you're only doing it for 80, you're getting it down to like 50% of people riding. Is there something we can do then to adjust the scheduling? Well, that's what we've got to, I think that's the evaluation. So I'm all for doing that evaluation, and then then we have to figure out how we would, pull or, charge a nominal fee or something to, bring that down. So I think we have to quantify first what we could actually accomplish by doing any of that.
I think we should look into it. 40% is shockingly low.
Well, yeah, and I think it's a good exercise. I mean, this is a totally data-driven decision. I mean,
Yeah.
This is a pure math
This is
problem.
right. This is a data-driven decision, and there's no better decision to make than with the data.
And
So-
seemingly, given the size of the district, you could potentially cut large routes if possible. I mean, potentially, I'm just saying, if it came back like that.
The challenge here is the variables are many.
Yeah.
You rattled off 8 of them, and then the big one is the who. Who in each area, if it's uniformly spread out throughout the whole district, then this is a drill in nothing. If it's all of a sudden in deep pockets, then it becomes a drill in something.
Yeah.
So, Ron, do you have any thoughts?
No, I think it's wise to look, if you like, and we could table it.
Well,
Would we be looking to do this for next school year?
Well, again, we'd have to talk to them.
See where we can start. The place we can start is with the seniors that buy parking passes. We get them to sign off right off the bat. I'm not going to take the bus. We take those kids out of the system, and that's our first look. And that's a couple hundred students in each building, and that gives us, I think, a first look on what that would potentially do with routing.
Maybe it's a phased approach.
So that might be the first start, because we already know we're going to have 200 kids in each building
Right.
that are going to be driving.
Right.
Yeah. So if you sign off on parking pass, then you are basically.
We have a separate
saying
sign off
you
and
are
say, I'm not gonna ride the
getting
bus.
a bus.
And again, remember, it doesn't eliminate you from ever getting on a bus.
No.
It just means you might have to travel a couple blocks to get to a stop.
Yeah.
Or we'd have to create some type of system around it that, because you don't want to say, well, I paid my 20, again, I would not at this point. I paid my fee to ride the bus, and then he or she is riding the bus and they didn't pay. Well, maybe there is a per charge fee type of deal.
10 right.
Yeah, whatever, 10 right.
10 right.
10 right ticket.
I buy lunch.
I don't think it has to be something that there's a lot going on spring and summer, so, not this upcoming school year, but certainly start punching towards it.
But even if we can start to, as we're developing routes, eliminating students and seeing if that changes
Right.
changes the route, because it's all done
There's some
through person
scenarios
trainers.
based on
Yeah.
current data.
There's also a learning process, right? If you start to implement something and then it's working, you can take it to the next step.
Right.
The next step further.
Phase it in, that's what I was saying, phase it in.
I think this, I mean, this is not about, at least now, because I'm thinking along the same lines, this is not about revenue generation, but this is about cost,
Expense.
cost savings.
Cutting costs.
Yeah, efficiency.
I think it could run on both sides of the ledger, but it isn't meant to be punitive. It's meant to say that you heard Brad state earlier, we had to borrow money to make the payroll this time, because we're still cash deficient. So as much as things are improving, if I could loosely use that verb, we still have to be looking at everything with that critical eye. I mean, everything. And this is one thing that kind of sits there, whether it gets addressed, I think, Aaron, to your point, for this upcoming school year, Chris's point, maybe it gets phased in, I don't know, but I think it's time that it gets brought to the front line.
Of course.
It's always good to do when the gas prices are going up.
Another good point. And you're having a hard time finding drivers, or I shouldn't say hard time, but there seems to be some challenges
There's a
there.
shortage.
So if all of a sudden 2 or 3 positions don't need to be filled because of a route mastery, then it works on a lot of different levels. So, okay, so we get back to we have a recommendation for within the 1 to 1.5 mile. Is there a motion? Anyone would propose a motion to accept that recommendation to charge within 1.5 miles if someone chooses to do that, as presented? Okay.
I mean, I'll make the motion. I mean, if there's no, they're not riding the buses now. I mean, this is just, it would be a benefit if someone really wanted to ride.
We have a motion and a second. Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion on within the 1.5 miles?
So we're basically giving a few people an option that didn't have the option before.
Correct. With the cost.
With the cost.
Yes,
$400, normal,
360.
360.
which is
by
common
one
practice in most other districts.
Well, with all the-
Yes.
So everybody going here is used to that.
These are people that are not riding.
We have 0.
Zero.
Zero.
Oh, we're not required to put it around.
We did have one person who's come out.
Okay. So call for a vote, please. We have a motion.
The vote is open. The vote is unanimous. The motion passes.
Off of this discussion direction to move forward, I'm to evaluate the other options. Thank you. Item number 8, Will County 1 cent sales tax resolution number 218-09.
Mr. Kaufman, go ahead.
Thank you. Included in your packet are several pieces of information regarding the Will County 1 cent sales tax. It's been several months ago, we held a revenue generating brainstorming discussion time, and this topic came up. And so then the district continued to do some research. It's ironically that there were some other districts in the middle of doing research also. We kind of teamed up with them, so there's a small group of people in Will County that have been looking at this. What this essence is, it's a sales tax that can be charged in quarter increments up to 1 full cent on sales. Those sales, though, would not include everything that's currently subject to sales tax except for cars, trucks, ATVs, boats, RVs, mobile homes, unprepared food, drugs, farm equipment. So it doesn't expand to anything that's not currently being taxed, but it excludes those items. We've had some preliminary estimates made on if that tax was collected in Will County, what that would mean, and listed in your report is what it is for all the feeder districts. For our district, it would mean an additional revenue of $3.3 million. What can that $3.3 million be used to be spent on? It's a facilities tax, so it should be must be used for keeping the facilities up, improving them, or it could be used to abate tax also. So I've attached what, if this was to be passed in Will County, what we would be looking to use it for, would be in the first hand, would be to fund our capital improvement projects, and then if there was funds available, we would look to then abate debt service, tax levy. So with that, that's in a nutshell what it is. Bottom line, you have to have more than 50% of the school boards representing, no, I'm sorry, let me say this correctly. The school boards representing 50% or more, so it's 50.1 is my understanding, of the students within Will County. And if that's passed by the school boards, then it directs the ROE to get that on the ballot for referendum in the county. If it does pass, then it's levied countywide, and it's distributed to the districts based on the enrollment within the county. So you have a district, like say Indian Prairie 204, which is in DuPage and Will, they would get a prorated share of the proceeds based on the number of students in Will versus the number in total. So that's the mechanics. There's a timeline there. Anyway, that I would open it up for questions or discussion.
Do we know what our feeder districts have, that they've addressed this? Thank you. Do we know if the feeder districts have addressed this at their board levels and what their outcomes were?
Yes, 157C has passed it, 122, if they didn't, I know they're going to this month.
They're going to address it or
Going to pass it, at least that's the plan. I do know both 157C has and 122, I believe will, because Dr. Manville actually hosted the last breakfast that we went to discuss and see how many other districts were interested.
I talked to one of the board members from 159 today, and they just discussed it last night. They didn't take any action on it, so it just came to them in the form of an informational item. So I think they're kind of just waiting to see what happens.
Plainfield is the biggest winner in this, and so you know they're pushing for this.
Who determines that if it's a quarter, a half, up to 1%? How does that
That's a
determine?
good question.
Well, that really comes down to kind of a consensus among the school boards. What we're asking, or we presented here, is if the school board would consider it, we've said we would go for the 1 cent. So each school board kind of sets that out in their resolution, and so far the school boards that have passed it for the 1 cent.
So how many more schools have to do it so that it goes on the ballot?
Right now, it's pretty close because Joliet High School at this time has decided not to.
Okay.
Plainfield has, so the goal was for those participants to go ahead and get a commitment in May so they get that count to determine whether or not they need to try and find more districts in June.
If I read this right, and maybe Chris or Joe or Brad or Dr. Tingley, if you get the 1% and then abate the taxes by that amount, if we get into like an 2008 recession again and your sales are down and then your tax base is down too, you're kind of losing on both ends, or am I looking at this wrong, or is that
I think it's 1 cent.
1 cent? 1%, 1 cent?
1 cent.
Well, it's 1%.
1%.
Oh, 1.
Well, 1 cent, 1%, the sales tax goes down.
So if it's 7 1/4 goes to 8.
Okay.
So I want to address the concern about tax abating. So if you use the sales tax proceeds and the district was to abate their the tax that is capped, so their operating funds, that would then lower their PTEL limits, and then that does adjust their taxability in the future, because whatever your PTEL limit is for that year, it's just moved forward by the CPI. And I said we would look to abate, I said we would look to abate debt service. Debt service is one of those you can, if you, sales tax came in, we had the funds, you could abate it. Say there's a downturn in the economy, whatever, something unforeseen, then you could then go back to collecting. It has no effect on future collection, whereas if you abate operating levy, that does affect future
So
collection.
in other words, we could use that money to pay off long-term debt, those building bonds. Accelerate that payment.
Your observation was accurate.
Yes, observation, yes.
Because I've asked that exact same question twice, but you can shuffle it just enough that you don't give up your revenue stream. However, because I've been on this bandwagon now for a while and had conversations with people outside the districts, trying to find out what's the tenor of the community. There's two things you got to consider. One, we've got to get off the real estate tax narcotic, period. That that's for a lot of different things, but especially for school districts. Okay, because the federal tax law is changing, makes your real estate taxes less appealing. As unappealing as they are now, wait till you file your taxes next year and it'll even be less appealing. The second thing is that Will County, if there was a county in the state of Illinois that this made sense to do, it might actually be Will County, for the primary reason that we've turned into a logistics hub. And I talked to John Grueling at the Will County CED. The numbers vary, but say somewhere between 4 and 6% of the nation's GDP flows through Will County, either through Center Point, those big warehouses, rail, whatever it is. Well, that's outside money coming in here that would be taxed at 1% when they're buying gas, mechanical, whatever, eating their lunches here, whatever it is that it's not covered on this type of thing. That makes all the sense in the world, because if you're in a county where you don't have such a huge influx of economic activity, you're just shifting it around. You're basically saying, I'm going to pay it at the grocery store rather than pay it at my real estate taxes. We're here almost on the fuel tax alone, because every time you're stuck in traffic on 80 or wherever you're trying to move your way around, if you find yourself on Route 53, you know that that's part of the problem. Well, if it ever made sense at a place and time, it's this place, and the time is now. Because I've said it before, the model is broke. It's fundamentally flawed, and we just keep patching it.
I hear what you're saying, but it just feels like every month there's a new tax.
I agree. But it goes back to Brad, and then this is where the people have to hold the board accountable, that we got to have the discipline not to see this in addition to, but as instead of. So rather than coming back and maxing the levy every year, which everybody's accustomed to, we have to step back and say, okay, now we've got this other source of revenue. And we've nickel and dimed it, because nickels and dimes become dollars, with things like apparel contracts and other things that we've done here, bidding everything out. This is a real dollar bill that isn't on the rooftops that exist from Harlem to Gallagher, from Manhattan to Route 6. This is on other people coming through this county.
We're still taxing, though, we're still increasing.
I get it, but then we have a responsibility. We vote for this to not max levy every year.
Right. Unlike when you do a referendum where you're you can quantify it by, if your house is this value, this is a little different, this is consumption, right?
Right, you can control how much.
You can go to Cook County and buy it if you want to cross over to.
Drop down to Kankakee County.
Or buy something, but.
Can we quantify the economic activity that's coming from outside this area or something?
I'm sure
inside this area?
we probably could ask the CED. I mean, they've got some good numbers on that deal. And again, I don't have those in front of me, but again, logic being what it is, you know what the warehouse activity is here in and of itself, and those corridors are huge.
What's the CED trip?
Center of Economic Development.
Oh, of course.
I know this.
Can I ask you? Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Chair.
And this, I guess, Brad, you've been participating in these meetings. From a timing standpoint, I don't know anything about these types of things, but I always heard to try and do it in the, like not at the general election, not, when you're trying to do a referendum, you don't go for November, like why? And in the presentation, they were like, the first date they had was like for March of 2018. I mean, what's the rationale now for trying to get this done for this November election?
Well,
And is my assumption wrong? I mean,
see,
that's what-
I've been dealing with superintendents, you met with the business managers, Brad, what's the tenor of I know with ours, they're not very optimistic that it would pass. They want to get it on the ballot, see if there's any momentum that then we could build and move forward at a future election. Because the latest I was in conversations would be that November timeline, but Brad, you went to that last meeting.
Yeah, so there wasn't a ton of discussion about that, timing, whether it should be on March or November, but one of the things they did discuss is that, I don't remember the percentage, but it typically is the first time it usually doesn't pass, and so they wanted to first just see if there is a commitment by 51% of the representing boards, see if we even something that we want to move forward with. Who's they? Basically, the Will County business officials is where this first, so, after our revenue discussion.
That's my next question. Where did this generate from? I mean, obviously, we have a discussion here, but we two times didn't say this is what we, no, they were going on at the same time. This is a business, where did this idea? Yeah, where did this concept, this idea, it's generated from, right? It's available to us. There's many counties within the state that already have this in place. Well, right, but who actually proposed going down this route first? Yes, from the council.
So it kind of came in both angles. So we thought to go had a revenue generating discussion. We discussed, well, should we have any look at the 1 cent sales tax? I then went to the Will County business managers, brought this up. Plainfield is ironic, at the same time, Plainfield business manager brought it up also. So then we had Nichols call and make a presentation about what is the 1 cent sales tax and inform us of what it was. And then from there, a smaller group of business managers who had interest said, let's discuss this with our superintendents and see, and I already knew we'd had discussions about it, so, and that's how the whole process kind of got started.
This hasn't been tried, looking at the map, in the Chicago and the Collar counties this is all downstate.
It is. And it's been hit or miss.
Well, and that, in my opinion, that's where it's we're just shuffling the money around. But because we're such a crossroad, and we built an industry around that, it makes some sense to consider.
It's like 50% have, 25 are undecided, and 25 have said no.
But to Chris's point, this is not a metro type environment when you look at the counties on that map, it's moved down and down. Okay, so it's on here as an action item. Give me a little bit of a sense. Just if I'm wrong, please tell me that. We'd like a little more time to digest this.
More time?
Yeah, I mean, so, yeah, next meeting would kind of like, would like to have some action. I mean, we kind of said we wanted to see where we're at in May, to see where we kind of the numbers were. But if we need, more time and kind of June, then
This will give us a tally of who has committed in May, see how close they are.
I mean, if we don't do this now and they get to 50.1, it doesn't mean we're out. It just means that we'll be on after it's already hit
Right.
saturation.
Yeah.
But, that's it. my 2 cents.
Yeah.
It's 50.1% of the student population. The school
The
district
board's
is
representing 50.1%, correct?
It's a tough decision because it is a tax increase, but at the same breath, it's not in the roof, and where we're at, currently in our fiscal health, this would be a huge help. But
I think if you can,
$3.3 million is huge.
it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. For all the districts, I mean, Lennox will get 2.4 million. Summit Hill gets 1.4 million. you know, that's 157C, 1.2 million, that's a lot of money for all of our schools.
I think with a 30-day delay or pushing it to the June meeting, we give people a chance to ask questions.
Yeah, right.
And to get us into the resources that I mentioned, because I think there's some powerful numbers in there.
Very powerful.
That they can tell you what is generated within the county lines, what they believe comes from outside the county lines, and then I'm just going to leave you with the moral and ethical dilemma, is that it's instead of, not in addition to. And it doesn't mean it has to be dollar for dollar, but whomever is sitting up here has to, if this was to ever pass, and they start handing you $3 million checks, then you have to find a way to relieve some of that burden elsewhere.
Okay. Table.
Okay, very good discussion. Thank you.